I've been laid off 4 times, and every single time there was one question that kept coming back, not just from friends or family, but from me. If you ask yourself that question too, this is the video for you. The question is, what should I do next?
That question can feel almost impossible to answer because maybe the truth is you don't know. And maybe that scares you, not because you don't want to work. In fact, it is the opposite. But you're feeling exhausted and emotionally defeated. You've spent years learning and advancing your career, doing what you thought you were supposed to do, checking the boxes, being responsible. And then one day, someone else makes a decision, suddenly wondering, if I don't have this job anymore, what should I do next? That always followed by, what is my purpose? What is my passion? Maybe the problem isn't that we don't know what we want. Maybe there's something deeper and we've never really had the chance to learn to figure it out. Because from the time we're kids, we inherit all these stories about work, about success, about what makes a life meaningful. We don't even realize they're stories, and some are actually just highlights. We just accept them as truth. Today, I want to share 4 of the biggest ones. You don't have to agree with me, but I think once you can see these stories, they may stop running your life. And that's when you finally get the power back to ask a different question. Not, what should I do next? What do I actually want? Question for you. Have you always known what you wanted to do? Or are you still figuring it out? Keep that answer in your head as we go through this. When I was younger, I thought I wanted to become a chemist. Not because I loved chemistry, not because I spent my free time reading chemistry books. I thought I should become a chemist because chemistry was my strongest subject. I got A's all the time. It was quite easy for me. I also had wonderful teachers, and many people told me I was good at it. So naturally, I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Has that ever happened to you? Were you ever pushed towards something simply because you were good at it? When I got to college and looked at the syllabus, I realized something. The reality looked very different from the idea. There were chemistry classes after chemistry classes after chemistry classes. And I remember thinking, wait, is this really what I want? The deeper I looked, the more I realized I didn't want to spend my life focused on just one thing. I wanted variety. I wanted exploration. I wanted to learn across disciplines. I liked science, but I also liked business and art. That was the first time I realized being good at something and wanting to build a life around it are 2 very different things. This reminds me why I shouldn't take it seriously when friends tell me I should open a restaurant just because they liked my dinner. Here's another challenge. We can only choose from paths we know exist. Growing up, my world was relatively small. My parents owned a business. Most of the careers I saw were traditional careers: doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher, professions we can see in our day-to-day life. Now, I didn't know about medical illustrator with starting salary at 70K per year and potential earning up to 250K for senior level. I didn't know about data analyst. Entry level starts around 65K and potential earnings for seniors average over 150K. I didn't know that pilot has one of the highest earning potential without crazy amount of years in training. With a starting salary of 85 to 100K, with median annual wage for airline pilots at around 226K, and senior pilots have potential earnings up to 450K per year. I didn't know about all the good salary careers that many people are pursuing today. So let me ask you, how can you choose a path you've never seen before? And that's why I think so many people feel stuck. Not because they lack ambition, not because they lack ability, but because they don't know what's available to them. There's another assumption hiding underneath all of this. Not only are we expected to know what we want, we're expected to know early and somehow stick with it forever. But when you really think about it, that's a strange expectation. Because the world keeps changing, the careers our parents knew aren't necessarily the careers available today. And many of the careers that exist today didn't even exist when we were growing up. Think about aviation for a moment. There used to be a role called a flight engineer. On many commercial aircraft, there were 3 people in the cockpit: the captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer. It was a respected, highly paid, and skilled career. Then aircraft technology improved, computers automated much of that work, and the role largely disappeared. Or think about travel agents. When I was younger, becoming a travel agent was a perfectly respectable career path. The pay was pretty good with perks and good deals. People relied on travel agents to book flights, hotels, cruises, and vacations. Today, most of us can do that ourselves in a few minutes on our phones. The job didn't completely disappear, but it changed dramatically. And That's really the point. Sometimes jobs disappear, sometimes they evolve, and sometimes new jobs appear. When I was growing up, nobody talked about becoming a user experience designer. Nobody talked about food scientists. Definitely nobody talked about content creators. Many of those careers either didn't exist yet or were too new for most people to consider. So let me ask you something. If the world keeps changing, which we know it does, why do we expect ourselves to make one permanent career decision at age 18? Maybe the problem isn't that we're indecisive. Maybe we're trying to make permanent decisions in a world that's constantly changing. Because if flight engineers could disappear, if travel agents could transform, if entire industries can be reshaped by technology, then maybe the most valuable skill isn't choosing the perfect path. Maybe it's learning how to navigate change. We're seeing AI transforms many professions today, including my own field. The people who succeed may not be the ones who picked the perfect career. They may be the ones who learned how to keep learning, adapting, and reinventing themselves. I'll talk more about that in a future video. What is a job you remember from your childhood that barely exists today? Leave a comment below. I'm curious what careers you've seen change during your lifetime. And then there's something even more powerful happening. We grow up surrounded by stories of people who seem to have found their calling early. We all know Taylor Swift writing songs as a teenager. You hear about Simone Biles dedicated her whole childhood to gymnastics and became the GOAT. We learn about Einstein devoted his whole life to science. Even on his deathbed in 1955, he was still actively writing equations. These stories are super inspiring, but they also create a hidden assumption that successful people always knew what they wanted. That if we haven't found our calling by now, we're somehow behind. But think about it. We celebrate these stories precisely because they're unusual. Nobody writes books about the millions of people who changed career 3 times, or movies about the people who became successful after trying 6 different things. Nobody gives TED Talks title, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted until I turned 42. And yet, that's probably a much more common experience. We totally have confused the exception for the rule. Let me ask you, how many people do you know personally who followed one straight career path their entire lives? And then how many people do you know who had to pivot, adapt, or reinvent themselves along the way? I think one of the most damaging ideas we've been sold is that somewhere out there, there's one perfect career waiting for us, one calling, one passion, one thing we're meant to do forever. We just haven't found it yet. What if that's not true? What if there isn't one perfect path? There are many paths, and your job isn't to find the perfect one. Your job is to explore enough to find the next right one. That shift changed everything for me because suddenly I wasn't looking for certainty anymore. I was looking for curiosity. One idea that really stuck with me from the book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. Instead of asking, what am I passionate about? Ask, what am I curious enough to get good at? Because passion often follows competence, progress, and doing. In other words, you get hooked after you get good. Think about your own life. What's something you enjoyed now that you weren't passionate about when you first started? So let's zoom out for a second. Think about what we've uncovered today. We were taught that if we're good at something, we should do it forever. That we're supposed to know what we want early in life. That choosing a different path somehow means we failed. And that successful people somehow figure it out from the very beginning. No wonder so many of us feel stuck. We've been trying to live up to stories that were never designed to fit everyone's life. But here's the good news. Stories can and should be questioned and rewritten. I think that's where discovering what you want actually begins. Not by finding the perfect answer overnight, but by slowly unconditioning yourself from the beliefs that were handed to you. Because once those stories lose their grip, you finally get the power back to ask a different question. Not what am I supposed to do, but what kind of life do I actually want to build? Looking back, I started out thinking I'll be a chemist. I actually became a food scientist. I never planned to become an entrepreneur after that. I definitely never imagined I'll end up designing software. None of those paths were on my radar when I was 18. They will only appear because I kept exploring. That's the big idea I want to leave with you today. What limits our choices is often not a lack of ability. Maybe you've never been lost. Maybe you've simply been living inside someone else's story. And the exciting part is you get to write the next chapter now. Drop me a comment and tell me, is that something you wanted to pursue once, but never even considered a real option?